Number 10, blurry. I got my first pair of glasses last week. My parents didn't think I needed them at first, but the doctor said that there was something wrong with more than just my eyes that was apparently pretty common, and that I needed specially prescribed glasses for my own good. He said that many people were never given the chance to see the way I would, so I was lucky to get them. I thought he meant cars and faraway words would become less blurry. But over the span of a couple of days, many more things have become more clear. I started seeing nightmare creatures, all around. I'd never seen them there before, like in the corners of my room and in darkened parking lots. I took my glasses off for the first time today, and let me just say it's amazing how quickly demons and creatures turn into trees and shadows. I know I'm not seeing the truth, but I'm a simple person. I'd rather things remain blurry, just the way it is for everyone else. Number 9, the old man in the well. Keith was 12 the first time the old man in the well spoke to him. Keith was out playing after dark on the family's small farm near the well. The old well had beams supporting a rope and pulley with a bucket attached, even though Keith was told that well ran dry before he was born. Suddenly he heard someone say his name in a slow, raspy voice. Keith whirled around and saw no one. A look of confusion spread across his face as he heard it again. Keith! This time it was said with more force and a bit louder. The voice sounded like one of the old farmers who liked to smoke, thought Keith. Looking down the well, Keith heard the same voice asking, "Have you got anything tasty?" Keith couldn't see anything past the first 12 or so feet down the well, even though it was a full moon. "Who are you? How'd you get down there?" Keith asked. "If you give me something tasty, I'll reward you," replied the voice. All Keith had were some cookies he had stuffed in his pocket as he left to play. He put those in the bucket and it lowered it. He had lowered it nearly 40 feet and was literally at the end of his rope when he no longer felt the weight of the bucket on the rope. 20 seconds passed and he felt the weight of the bucket again and began to pull the bucket up. As he finished pulling the bucket up to the top, he heard the voice say, "No nice." Keith saw a reflection in the bucket and saw a rectangular piece of silver metal, about the size of an army dog tag. It was completely flat and smooth. "Want fresh," the voice said. Even though Keith tried to talk to the old man again, there was no response. Keith made up a story about where he found the metal and took it to his father, who took it into town and confirmed it was an ounce of pure silver. After that, Keith kept it a secret. It took a while to discover that the old man was only there the night of full moons. Keith quickly learned that only live things he put in the well would be rewarded, but only once for each item and once every full moon. So one of each kind of animal was lowered down the well and rewarded. Keith now had a cigar box mostly full of silver pieces by the time he was 16, but had run out of different animals to get rewarded for. It was around this time that a local farmhand went missing. It was also the same time that Keith was rewarded with gold pieces for the first time. Once Keith took over the farm, temp workers seemed to vanish every now and then without explanation from the farm. The old man had finally found something tasty enough to always reward. Number 8, wedding day. I first met my wife in high school. Her beautiful, sparkling eyes drew me in. They were a reflection of heaven, and her voice, a chorus of angels. I proposed after we graduated from college, and we planned our future together. But things have changed since then. She's been acting strange lately. In bed, she'd toss and turn all night, muttering under her breath. Some nights I'd hear other strange noises, like faint screams. I still loved her though. We decided to get married at our local church. Before I knew it, I was waiting at the altar for her to walk down the aisle. I nodded to the priest and signaled to the men sitting in the front row. We pinned her on top of the altar as the priest wrapped her arms and legs in chains. She hissed and howled, her body writhing in agony. The priest grasped the crucifix in front of her face and began the recitation. I wasn't going to let her go. I wanted my wife back. Number 7, go to bed. Jacob decided to stay at home when his mother went out. She told him to go to bed at 11, but unfortunately, he couldn't hear her over the sound of his music. Jacob haphazardly waved his mother goodbye as she closed the door. Jacob spent an hour and a half playing with his phone. Games, YouTube videos, movies, music. He even texted his best friend for a while until she no longer replied. He didn't pay any attention to the time until his phone battery hit 10%. Jacob realized that his mother never called or texted him in all the time that he had his phone. Jacob sent her a text. "Hey," no reply. He was confused as to why she wouldn't answer him. She always answered her phone. His confusion chilled into concern as night fell and midnight rose. He sent another. "Mom, where are you?" Again, no answer. "Sweetie?" A familiar voice rang out from behind the couch. It sounded like his mother's, but it wasn't. Not entirely. It was warped, crinkling like folded tinfoil. Jacob jumped and spun around, only for thick black hair to consume his sight. "Why haven't you gone to bed?" Number 6, the paper airplane. My bedroom was upstairs. I had a good view from my window to see the new neighbors move in next door early in the morning. There was a man and woman carrying boxes into the house. They must have been a couple. My eyes traveled to the neighbor's vacant, upstairs bedroom window, which was directly across from mine. It was open, and inside was a girl who looked about my age. She saw me and motioned for me to open my window, so I did. She leaned out the window, curved her hand around her mouth, and whispered to me, "Nice to meet you. I'm Sarah." I laughed. "Nice to meet you, Sarah. I'm Sam." She smiled. "Keep your window open," she said, and moved out of sight. I was confused. "Keep my window open?" She returned with something in her hand, then tossed it over to me. It was a paper airplane. It slowly and gently made its way through my window, onto my floor behind me. I walked over and picked it up. On top was written "Open." I opened it, and there was a message. "Hey Sam, I'll come over tonight and introduce myself." I thought it was a bit strange and wrote back, "Come over tonight? What do you mean?" I turned around to toss it back, but she wasn't there. The window was still open, so I tossed it in anyway, thinking she'll reply sooner or later. It was late into the evening, and still no reply from Sarah. My mom invited the new neighbors over for dinner. I figured this is what Sarah meant by coming over tonight. "Honey, come down for dinner," my mom shouted. I went downstairs into the dining room to sit at the table. But I didn't see Sarah, just her parents. I couldn't help but ask, "Where's Sarah?" The man and woman stared at me as if I said something out of place. "Excuse me?" the man said. I repeated myself, "Sarah, your daughter?" The woman put her hands up, covering her mouth. Tears flowed down her face. The man stood. "Our daughter died a year ago in an accident. I don't know what you're up to, but that's enough." They both left the house immediately. Mom glared at me. "Why would you do that, son? Just go to your room." A flurry of confusion was spinning in my head. I couldn't speak. I made my way back to my room, turned on my light, and lay on my bed. Then a paper airplane flew through my window, elegantly landing on my floor. I picked it up and looked out my window. Sarah was standing in the darkness of her room. My heart was pounding. She moved closer until the moonlight hid her face, her eyes dark and skin gray. I looked down to read the message. "Behind you." My lights flickered off. The floorboards behind me squeaked. A dark whisper into my ear. "Sam. Number 5. Mirror entity." No one believed me when I told them that my reflection in the mirror was alive. "Grow up, dude. You're not a 5 years old. You're 24. That was all they said to me while laughing, as a response to my story. Well, I had to admit, it was indeed sounded like a typical fear a 5 years old would have. But I swear to God, it was true. I couldn't remember since when my reflection came to life, but I remembered that it wasn't like that when I was a child. It was recently, I was sure, and it wasn't a ghost. Well, your reflection was alive, looked like an act of a ghostly thing, but no, mine wasn't a ghost. It felt to me as if it was a creature, an entity who lived behind the mirror, or trapped in there. I couldn't tell why or how. What I could tell was my reflection was constantly trying to grab me, as if it was going to pull me inside the mirror while jumped out. Nope, that wasn't gonna happen. Ever. Ever since I realized that my reflection was alive and constantly trying to grab me inside the mirror, I always did my best to keep my distance from reflective surfaces, like when I brushed my teeth every night, for example. I always stood a few meters from the mirror so it wouldn't be able to grab me. The entity in the mirror was constantly showing a grumpy and angry face every time it was just the two of us in the room. No matter how I tried to smile in front of the mirror, the entity behind it never smiled. Never. It always looked grumpy and angry. One day, I took off from my flat for a sightseeing in the mall nearby when suddenly an earthquake occurred. It was a huge one. Everyone was hysterical. They were running around in panic, looking for a shelter. I ran to cover myself under a table to avoid getting hit by anything that fell. But I was too late. I didn't realize something fell from above me and hit me in the head. I fell down and I groaned from the pain. As the pain slowly faded, I started to look around. The earthquake had stopped. The mall was slightly dark. The light was out. It was messy in there. I gasped when I noticed something shiny not far from me. I turned my head and I saw a mirror, probably from the fitting room near me. In reflex, I crawled away as far as I could, even though my head and my legs were hurt. Right there and then, I saw my reflection in the mirror. For the first time in forever, I saw the entity behind the mirror smiling at me. A devilish smile. A sense of horror grasped me as I saw the entity waving at me from behind the mirror, as if it was saying goodbye. For good. Number 4, the perfect plan. On Monday, I came up with the perfect plan. No one even knew we were friends. On Tuesday, he stole the gun from his dad. On Wednesday, we decided to make our move during the following day's pep rally. On Thursday, while the entire school was in the gym, we waited just outside the doors. I was to use the gun on whoever walked out first. Then he would take the gun and go into the gym blasting. I walked up to Mr. Quinn, the guidance counselor, and shot him in the face 3 times. He fell back into the gym, dead. The shots were deafening. We heard screams in the auditorium. One could not see us yet. I handed him the gun and whispered, "Your turn." He ran into the gym and started firing. I followed a moment after. He hadn't hit anyone yet. Kids were scrambling and hiding. It was mayhem. I ran up behind him and tackled him. We struggled. I wrenched the gun out of his hands, turned it on him, and killed him. I closed his mouth forever. On Friday, I was anointed a hero. It was indeed the perfect plan. Number 3, dead man's tree. A few years ago, I was walking through the woods off the beaten track a bit, and I smelt this really overpowering, sweet smell. Being nosy, I pulled back the undergrowth to have a look and found a dead body. The guy had clearly been there a while and wasn't looking great, all swollen and green and black with various runny bits. The local wildlife had also been dining well for a few days. I called the police, who told me to wait with the body until they arrived. Being in the middle of nowhere, it took a while for them to arrive, and it got dark, and I was just sat there in the dark with him for a long time. It turned out he had committed suicide. For a long time afterwards, I had dreams about him, and he would talk to me, and not nice things. Mainly about how he was angry I had disturbed his resting place, and he wanted me to kill myself. Probably just my imagination, but all pretty disturbing at the time. Number 2, the angry man. A few summers ago, I went for a bike ride around midnight with a friend. We went our separate ways at the end of the evening, and I had about 2 blocks to ride back by myself. Because of construction, I had to ride on the sidewalk, but the streets were dead. But it wasn't a problem until right where I was about to turn left onto my street. There was this man walking by himself, maybe 40s, a little scruffy, but not homeless. The sidewalk was narrow, and I didn't want to freak him out, so when I got about 6 feet behind him, I said, "Hey, behind you!" And he turned around and gave me this super angry look. I turned down my street, and he started to follow me, literally screaming about how I was a fucking cunt, and he was gonna kill me and all that. I live right off the corner, and I didn't want him to figure that out. So I decided to do another loop around the block. That's not the scary part. The scary part is that when I looped back around and looked down the street, I saw him standing on my fucking front stoop, staring out at the street like the motherfucker knew I lived there. He saw me ride by again, but he didn't say anything. I ended up going back to the friends, but my bike got stolen from the alleyway by the house 2 days later. Number 1, bathroom intruder. When I was 10, I woke up in the middle of the night because there was a lot of noise coming from the bathroom down the hall. I decided to walk to my parents' room, and as I passed the bathroom, I stopped and turned to look inside. There was an inexplicably tall, shadowy figure rummaging through one of the bathroom drawers. When I stopped, the figure turned to look at me. I was wide awake but assumed it was just my father. I climbed into my parents' bed, told my mother that my dad was making so much noise in the bathroom. It woke me up. However, my dad was still in bed. No one had gotten up in the night, so I have no idea what I saw rummaging through the bathroom drawer, but I will never forget it.